Welcome. Today we will be reading lesson 45 in the workbook and from the text, chapter 5, section 5, the ego's use of guilt, paragraphs 1 through 4. And now for lesson 45. God is the mind with which I think. Today's idea holds the key to what your real thoughts are. They are nothing that you think, just as nothing that you think you see is related to vision in any way. There is no relationship between what is real and what you think is real. Nothing that you think are your real thoughts, resemble your real thoughts in any respect. Nothing that you think you see bears any resemblance to what vision will show you. You think with the mind of God. Therefore, you share your thoughts with Him as He shares His with you. They are the same thoughts because they are thought by the same mind. To share is to make alike or to make one. Nor do the thoughts you think with the mind of God leave your mind, because thoughts do not leave their source. Therefore, your thoughts are in the mind of God as you are. They are in your mind as well, where He is. As you are part of His mind, so are your thoughts part of His mind. Where then are your real thoughts? Today we will attempt to reach them. We will have to look for them in your mind, because that is where they are. They must still be there because they cannot have left their source. What is thought by the mind of God is eternal, being part of creation. Our 3 5-minute practice periods for today will take the same general form that we used in applying yesterday's idea. We will attempt to leave the unreal and seek for the real. We will deny the world in favor of truth. We will not let the thoughts of the world hold us back. We will not let the beliefs of the world tell us that what God would have us do is impossible. Instead, we will try to recognize that only what God would have us do is possible. We will also try to understand that only what God would have us do is what we want to do. And we will also try to remember that we cannot fail in doing what He would have us do. There is every reason to feel confident that we will succeed today. It is the will of God. Begin the exercises for today by repeating the idea to yourself. closing your eyes as you do so. Then spend a fairly short period in thinking a few relevant thoughts of your own, keeping the idea in mind. After you have added some 4 or 5 thoughts of your own to the idea, repeat it again and tell yourself gently, "My real thoughts are in my mind. I would like to find them." Then try to go past all the unreal thoughts that cover the truth in your mind and reach to the eternal. Under all the senseless thoughts and mad ideas with which you have cluttered up your mind are the thoughts that you thought with God in the beginning. They are there in your mind now, completely unchanged. They will always be in your mind exactly as they always were. Everything you have thought since then will change, but the foundation on which it rests is wholly changeless. It is this foundation toward which the exercises for today are directed. Here is your mind joined with the mind of God. Here are your thoughts one with His. For this kind of practice, only one thing is necessary. Approach it as you would an altar dedicated in heaven to God the Father and to God the Son. For such is the place you are trying to reach. You will probably be unable as yet to realize how high you are trying to go. Yet even with the little understanding you have already gained, you should be able to remind yourself that this is no idle game, but an exercise in holiness and an attempt to reach the kingdom of heaven. In the shorter exercise periods for today, try to remember how important it is to you to understand the holiness of the mind that thinks with God. Take a minute or two as you repeat the idea throughout the day to appreciate your mind's holiness. Stand aside, however briefly, from all thoughts that are unworthy of Him whose host you are, and thank Him for the thoughts He is thinking with you. In Lesson 45, we are told that individual thoughts of reality are not reality. Real thoughts are eternal, unchanging, unlimited, and shared with one's source. These thoughts that are shared never really leave one's mind, as thoughts do not leave their source, a recurring theme throughout the course. To share is to make the same, to make alike. and to join with. One's real thoughts are in the divine mind, which one is a portion of. Today's exercise attempts to reach those thoughts. One is being asked to discard the unreal in favor of the real. One is denying the world by turning away from its appearances and stepping aside of the thoughts of the world that are holding one back from the truth. One reminds oneself that one cannot fail in what is the will of one's Creator. And one acknowledges the holiness of this effort, approaching the task as if walking forward to an altar in a place of sacredness. And now for our text reading for today, from chapter 5, section 5, The Ego's Use of Guilt, paragraphs 1 through 4. Perhaps some of our concepts will become clearer and more personally meaningful if the ego's use of guilt is clarified. The ego has a purpose, just as the Holy Spirit has. The ego's purpose is fear, because only the fearful can be egotistic. The ego's logic is as impeccable as that of the Holy Spirit, because your mind has the means at its disposal to side with heaven or earth, as it elects. But again, remember that both are in you. In heaven there is no guilt, because the kingdom is attained through the atonement, which releases you to create. The word create is appropriate here because once what you have made is undone by the Holy Spirit, the blessed residue is restored and therefore continues in creation. What is truly blessed is incapable of giving rise to guilt and must give rise to joy. This makes it invulnerable to the ego because its peace is unassailable. It is invulnerable to disruption because it is whole. Guilt is always disruptive. Anything that engenders fear is divisive because it obeys the law of division. If the ego is the symbol of separation, it is also the symbol of guilt. Guilt is more than merely not of God. It is the symbol of attack on God. This is a totally meaningless concept except to the ego. But do not underestimate the power of the ego's belief in it. This is the belief from which all guilt really stems. The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division. How could part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking him? We spoke before of the authority problem as based on the concept of usurping God's power. The ego believes that this is what you did because it believes that it is you. If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. The ego is quite literally a fearful thought. However ridiculous the idea of attacking God may be to the sane mind, never forget that the ego is not sane. It represents a delusional system and speaks for it. Listening to the ego's voice means that you believe it is possible to attack God, and that a part of him has been torn away by you. Fear of retaliation from without follows, because the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected. Whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real. If you enthrone the ego in your mind, your allowing it to enter makes it your reality. This is because the mind is capable of creating reality or making illusions. I said before that you must learn to think with God. To think with him is to think like him. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Unnatural thinking will always be attended with guilt, because it is the belief in sin. The ego does not perceive sin as a lack of love, but as a positive act of assault. This is necessary to the ego's survival, because as soon as you regard sin as a lack, you will automatically attempt to remedy the situation, and you will succeed. The ego regards this as doom, but you must learn to regard it as freedom. We are informed in this section that the ego is the symbol of both guilt and attack on the eternal. The ego's attempt to divide the indivisible cannot but be seen as an attack. The ego believes it has succeeded in what we have called before the authority problem. which is usurping the power of one's creator by creating oneself. And to judge or condemn any part of creation is to attack that which created it. Thus, following the ego's guidance means one believes it is possible to attack one's creator. The consequence of guilt is so strong that one expects to be punished for one's sinful transgressions. And thus fear of retaliation is born. The mind has both the ability to create and extend love and to make illusions. By accepting the ego's beliefs into one's mind, one has made a world of separation, suffering, and illusions. The way out is to see sin merely as lack of love, and not as actual attack. Thus one is relieved of the guilt, and then one can seek correction of the original problem, the lack of love.